folks, welcome to another episode of Human First Leadership. I'm Lauren Rueve, Senior Coach at Mindmaven, where we help startup leaders and venture capitalists 10 times their productivity, save 12 hours a week, and achieve true greatness by focusing on relationships. Today I'm thrilled to be joined by Hadi Moussa and Tony Jamous from Oyster, the global employment platform helping companies hire, pay, and care for distributed teams around the world. Some people may remember our previous episode with Tony, where we explored the vision behind building a truly borderless company. Today's conversation builds on that foundation as Hadi steps into the CEO role following a thoughtful founder-led transition, marking an important new chapter for Oyster. Hadi brings deep experience scaling global mission-driven companies with leadership roles across Airbnb, Facebook, Deliveroo, Coursera, and Coupal, while Tony continues to support Oyster's long-term vision, values, and impact. Thank you guys so much for being here. Go ahead and dive in. Exciting times for you two. So, of course, you both are super deeply connected to Oyster's mission, but you've arrived at leadership through different paths and experiences. I'd love to just start by sharing with our listeners how each of you feel, or what each of you feel, human first leadership means to you in today's world.
Great. Well, thank you for having us, Lauren. It's great to be here. As you mentioned, I've recently stepped into this role, and I've come to this role in, a different way than maybe Tony has. But for me, when we talk about human first leadership, it's first and foremost recognizing that, your team members, your team, they are not resources that you are just optimizing. They are people, they are whole people, they have lives, they have families, they have ambitions that exist outside of the work, outside of what you see on Slack or email. And so for me, it really means building a culture where you can have psychological safety for people to be able to express themselves at work, to bring their whole selves to work, but also pairing that with high performance, right? And in many cases, and in all cases, not seeing psychological safety and high performance as mutually exclusive, but actually as one is a prerequisite for the other. You need to build that psychological safety to be able to drive a high performance team and a high performance organization. But again, it all starts from recognizing, people as a whole and creating that type of environment at the company.
I cannot be more aligned with what Hadi just told us. And to complement this view, for me, human first leadership is about recognizing the potential of human that, in my opinion, is a limitless potential, and create an environment that enable these humans to tap into their full potential. And it starts with your relationship to yourself. In order for you to lead in a human-centric way, you need to lead yourself in a human-centric way. You need to take care of yourself. You need to remain non-reactive. You need to remain coherent. Your actions and your words are aligned with your values. And that goes a long way to create this great culture that Hadi was mentioning about.
Funny listening to you speak, Hadi, and I'm sure you guys have turned this over many times before making this decision and feeling this alignment, but it felt very reminiscent of my conversation with Tony. So it's nice to hear how strongly aligned you guys are. Tony, I remember your analogy was you were the gardener. And so your goal was to allow people to grow into their full selves and bring their full selves to work and kind of just showing up to shape that. So I thought that was really good. Well, Tony, as a founder, kind of making this transition, what were some of the things that you were most intentional about in preparing Hadi for this new role?
First, I needed to prepare the organization for the arrival of a new leader. So a year before Hadi joined us, I did a reorganization, flattened the org, brought the right people in the right places in the organization to allow this transition to happen successfully. What I was also intentional about is timing. I wanted to make this transition at a time where the company was very strong. 2025 was our best year. We've hit all of our financial goals, and before we were going through a challenging time because the world was going in a macroeconomic crisis, inflation, layoffs. So I needed to do this after we passed this critical phase in the company's history. And thirdly, I wanted to be intentional in how we find the next leader. So I structured a process that lasted 8-9 months, interviewed more than 50 candidates, CEOs at top of their games around the world, and build a case study to assess them and a scorecard that was shared with the board, preparing the board and the search committee for making the decision.
Love that, especially the intentionality behind the process. And talk to me a little bit, Tony, about, your thoughts behind Hadi specifically, and where does his leadership style maybe differ or complement your style?
Yeah, to answer that question, we have to look at the first phase of building Oyster, where I was the CEO and founder. In that phase, what we needed ability to create a category from scratch, essentially 0 to 1, let's say, build in the first team. But these same skills, they don't scale very well as the organization become more complicated and bigger. We are now over $1.2 billion company in terms of market cap. We're growing fast, the business getting more complicated, and that requires a different skill set. It requires a strategic mind, but as importantly, an ability to execute and build the operational rhythm that I could learn, but I decided not to because I would put the company at risk. Why would I jeopardize our growth as the major shareholder of this organization? And I knew that we could find these skills out there. There are great people like Hadi that are designed for this phase of growth of the business.
That makes total sense. And I think it takes a lot of self-awareness, which you and I had talked about, Tony, as being something that was into your growth as the leader. Like just being willing to accept that. I think that's a really strong position as a leader, that you were able to accept that and put the company's growth first and find the leader that is able to lead this new. Hadi, in a recent interview, you shared that leaving your home country to build your career gave you a firsthand insight into how uneven the access to opportunity can be. Knowing how important that is to Oyster's mission and, kind of how that drew you to Oyster, I'm curious how that experience shaped how you show up as a leader today.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, first, and this is one of the key reasons why I joined Oyster, right? This is one of the main reasons. When I spoke to Tony, when we talked about the mission, it resonated very deeply because it was a lived experience. It was a very personal experience. Growing up in a place where, in a way, there is a ceiling to kind of your professional ambitions, to the opportunities, that's based on kind of where you are, where you grew up, rather than maybe the talent or the skills that you bring. It's almost a lesson in kind of seeing that inequality that exists today at the global level. And it gave me this almost kind of very deep understanding of why Oyster really exists today. And so in terms of what it means in, how I show up and, how I want to lead here, I think it's that sense of urgency, right? So I know that, every day we're not executing, every day we're not accelerating, every day we're not growing. There is someone out there in the world who, is not getting access to that opportunity, is not getting access, to opportunities where they live within their communities. And so that creates this real sense of urgency to make sure that we are accelerating, we are driving our mission, we are driving our impact. And really my kind of going forward, my focus is on how can we get Oyster from a company that is enabling global employment, that has done really well over the past years, kind of Tony mentioned, to one that continues to accelerate global employment, right? We want to build that world where, we know talent is global. We want to make sure now that opportunity is also global at the same time. And so the background, the lived experience, I think it kind of makes me really obsessed and focused on removing that friction that exists today between kind of a person and their talent and also their job maybe, or the opportunity that they are looking for.
That's fantastic.
Lauren, I just want to jump in and say, beyond his technical expertise, and he can talk about it forever, this is why Hadi is the right CEO for Oyster.
Absolutely, that meaning and that connection to the vision. And also, I think you hit on a really interesting word, urgency, and thinking about how that meaning and that purpose really drives you guys to the velocity that you're looking to achieve. And another value that I know came up in our previous episode, Tony, was transparency. And I know how important that is to both as leaders. I'm curious how you balance something like transparency and steadiness, especially during moments like transition. So Tony, you kind of talked a little bit earlier about prepping the team, making sure you guys were in the right place to make this transition. Talk to us a little bit about that balance between transparency and steadiness throughout this transition.
Yeah, let me share my perspective here. So the goal is how can provide maximum amount of transparency at the right time. So timing is important. So for instance, Hadi, essentially he joined us officially in January, but he's been working behind the scene with the senior level team months before the transition, and he was present on our board meeting in November in San Francisco, meeting boards and the team. But we did the announcement only in mid-January because we needed to make sure that the market doesn't react without us preparing the communication and ensure that the world knows this is coming from a place of strength. So we needed to control the communication. This is an example of how we provide maximum amount of transparency to the right people at the right time.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, the only thing I would add is, transparency doesn't necessarily mean you kind of have to dump or share every single kind of internal thought with, onto the team. I think it means being clear about the why behind a decision, the why behind the change. And I think the transition was a good example. We were transparent about Tony already talked about it today. We've almost over-communicated the why, right? If we are making this transition at this point in time for Oyster, and because we wanted to see the that was behind it, the strengths that was behind it. But I think that communication of the why itself, when you are making a big decision, when you are going through a transition like this one, for me is kind of what transparency is all about, and how you bring the team along a journey and along the changes that you need to make.
And as you both were speaking, it's funny that the of strength and intention came up as both of you were speaking about how to handle this transition. I know this was exactly how it was framed, is at wanting this to be made from a place of strength and intention and feeling successful in doing that. I'm curious what each of you felt was most important to get right for the organization, for the leadership team, for one another, to make this transition feel as strong as it did for the two of you. I'm curious, what did you guys do along the way to make it feel like it was coming from that place of strength and intention?
First, for me, it was about being clear in my intentions of why I am doing this transition, and making sure it's coming from a place of love to the team because we want them to be very successful, and to the mission because we are on a mission to make the world more equal and free. That intention, I spent a lot of time clarifying within myself why I'm making this transition and align my actions and my words with this intention. That's most of the work, really. Everything else comes from this clarity and inner alignment. Secondly, we needed also to make sure that the process of selection was very structured, was to all the stakeholders. We had a search committee on the board. What are the parameters in which we assess each candidate to make sure that we use the right person, and also it was based on what the organization needed, right? It wasn't based on personal connection or personal biases. The job description was created from a 360 feedback I received from my team on what this organization need in terms of skills to take us to the next level.
That's amazing. I didn't know that piece. The fact that the JD was actually created from feedback from that's really interesting. Hadi, I'd love to hear your perspective. I just had to call it out.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would add is for the company, for the team, it was also really important to stress what kind of doesn't change and what is going to continue. I think that we really wanted the company to feel and the team to feel that maybe the driving the ship, the effectively was changing. But actually the destination, the mission, the values, they remain the same. And I think that was really important because many people had joined because they fundamentally believe in the mission and the kind of long-term destination. And so it was about creating that alignment, between obviously the two of us, but then sharing that with the team too. And, we had to make sure that we were both fully aligned, fully committed to what was best for Oyster over the long term, and communicate that to the team, create that reassurance for the team. Yes, some things might actually change. We have different focus areas as a company goes from 1 to 100 is different maybe priorities as it goes from 100 to a billion, etc. But actually the destination, the long-term mission, the mission itself doesn't really change. And I think that was really important. And that also makes it feel to the team, which is what it really was. This is not just, a replacement at this point. It feels more like, I think the best metaphor is more like a relay race, right? Tony has done such a great job of getting the company to this point. And now kind of it's in a way my turn to take the company to the next stage, all in the service of the long-term mission that Oyster has.
When I hear Hadi speaking, like my body soften and I realize how alignment we have and how much complementarity we have, and I feel like so grateful for.
I say it better myself, Tony. Just obviously speaking with you the first time and then now having this conversation, it is so interesting how many parallels I'm already hearing. For listeners, you should, as a thought exercise, go and listen to the first conversation with Tony and you'll have the same experience. Okay, something we haven't touched on yet so far, guys, AI. So of course, Oyster is sitting at the center of how work is changing globally, including the growing role of technology and AI. As leaders, how are you guys thinking about building systems that scale opportunity without losing sight of the human experience at work?
I'd like to defer that question to Hadi because I'm doing an AI cleanse right now, so maybe he can talk more.
A cleanse. I want to hear more. Okay, Hadi.
No, it's a really good question. And I think, one that many companies, many people are thinking about. My view is, look, we use AI to automate maybe the robotic aspects of, the HR process, maybe the compliance piece, the way that we surface information, the way that we manage kind of the paperwork. But we do it because then we want to be able to spend more time on the human parts, right? And support our customers, our team members with their, the complexity of the real-time employment relationships. These are some of the most important relationships that people have. And there is a lot of complexity in them that cannot be automated away. And that's where we kind of want to bring that human element to it. And I think that's a really important element, and one that also we hear from our customers is really important to them as well. And so I kind of, technology, AI in general as a bridge, even internally for our teams. We want to build systems that use AI to give people more agency, right? So they can work on higher value activities. It also allows them, with technology right now, they can work from anywhere, which gives them the level of flexibility in their lives too. So ultimately, I think we are pushing for a human first outcome, right? So while the process, kind of the underlying processes and technology can be automated with AI, we want kind of these really human relationships and touch points to remain a core part of the service that we provide, and also ensure that the work that our team is doing is really that high value human work that our customers really need.
Hadi, I recently heard from my CEO about the dichotomy of perspectives in AI. So on the one hand, you have the AI efficiency folks, and on the other hand, the AI opportunity folks. And it sounds like you guys are leaning more AI opportunity, where we want to keep our team, keep growing, but that one person can do 10 times what they could with the support or augmentation of technology while retaining those really human first aspects.
Yeah. And look, we are a compliance, we're a knowledge business. So there is a lot that AI can do to help us provide a better experience. But ultimately, we are dealing with employment and human relationships. And that's kind of where the human element is also very, very critical.
Well, guys, throughout our conversation, lots of like mindset have come up. I'm curious when we think about other leaders who are navigating some growth or pressure or change themselves. What is one behavior or mindset shift that has helped each of you lead more humanely, even when things are maybe chaotic?
I too, if I can share too. I think one we kind of already talked about a little bit, but I think is important. And I find, when the pressure is really high, leaders sometimes, what they try to do is kind of really try and micromanage. And when you micromanage, you get that sense of security because kind of you know that things are being done or you want them to be done in a certain way that you are comfortable with. But I found that kind of the more effective way is really to, really kind of shift that mindset to over communicate the context, communicate the why, as I was mentioning before, not give specific instructions. So instead of giving an order or instructions, take the extra time to explain why you are making, you want to make this kind of decision or why we want to go in that direction, what trade-offs we need to think about, and treat people like, the capable kind of adults that they are, right? And when you do that, I think it kind of, there is this element of it reduces the anxiety because they kind of understand why something is being done, what's the logic behind it. And then it gives them the agency to go and solve the problem without the leader having to kind of stay there over their shoulder waiting for them to get something done. And I find kind of that over communicating the context, especially in a pressure situation, is. And the second one is more related, I think, and it applies more to, as if you operate in a distributed company, in a global company. It applies in all cases, but it becomes even more important. And for me, that's assuming good intent, right? And because especially when you operate in a global distributed company with many different cultures, sometimes the context may not be shared. Sometimes it can get lost in the way that people are talking or writing. But if you start every interaction, and especially when you're under real pressure, with this assumption that the person you're working with, your colleague, is doing their best. They're trying to they have the same goal as you. They're trying to reach the same objective. Then the tone really shifts, right? And you're not trying to be confrontational or trying to fight over something. You actually want to collaborate. You want to find the best joint solution. And I think that creates the collaboration that you need, especially, again, in high pressure situations.
Importance of context and then indexing on that good intent. Actually, that's another one that Tony shared in our first conversation. Tony, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I can add, similar to what Hadi said, another angle, which is when you are faced with challenges as a leader, it's how you look at these challenges that determines your ability to react or to respond. So if you're looking at challenges as, instead of looking at them as setbacks, you look at them as redirections, then you are much less reactive and more responsive. And it all goes down to your relationship to yourself. While you're doing this work, what is your purpose here, and stay aligned with your long-term goals. That's how I handled these situations when things get difficult.
Mental reframe, absolutely. Well, gentlemen, I know this is a really inspiring conversation. I think our listeners are really going to enjoy hearing about the transition, and it sounds like you guys just have some really strong alignment that is going to bring Oyster even stronger into the next year. So excited to see where you guys take things. Anything either of you want to share, want to leave our listeners with? You feel like we didn't get a chance to touch on?
Just want to say that we live in exciting times. AI is going to change how we work, is changing how we work. Although I said I'm not going to talk about AI. I'm going to talk about AI. And specifically, it is a great opportunity to distribute opportunity on the planet. The economical output of a worker is going to be less and less dependent on where they are located. And that's a great news for the world and great news for Oyster and our mission.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. I think it's, there is also the potential for companies to start to grow from everywhere, right? With kind of smaller teams powered by AI also who have access to talent at a global level as well. So I think that's an exciting future that we hope Oyster will help enable going forward.
Excited to see where you guys take things. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Lauren.